My reference to China was that we know that under the one-child policy, vast numbers of baby girls never grew up, never got the opportunity to live. And that was true of the pagan and ancient and cruel world as well. And Rodney Stark argues that, in fact, the explosion of Christianity happened largely because little girls were valued equally with little boys and allowed to live. That's a profound point that is so easily overlooked. And it brings me to something else I'll come back to universalism and Paul in a moment, because I want to explore that in the context of our modern society. But before we do, G.K. Chesterton is famous for the remark that stop believing in God and you won't believe in nothing, you'll believe in anything. Now, that's where our culture's gone. Do you think that one of our major problems in the West is that we no longer have a narrative that binds us together?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a critical question for the West. So I don't in this book argue an instrumentalist view of Christianity. I'm not saying believe in Christianity because that'll save Western civilization. But incidentally, just by the way, it will save Western civilization. So I say believe in Christianity because I think it's true. And the evidence is overwhelming that it's true. And it fits with our senses, it fits with our rationality. And who can ignore the personality of Jesus Christ? But a separate argument is that the West was formed by Christianity. Now, here's a paradox. Christianity is truly a universal religion. It's open to every human being, whatever their background. The majority of Christians today are not Westerners. People in China are suffering persecution in order to live out their Christian faith. The same is true in Pakistan, in Africa. These people are 24-carat Christians, suffering much more persecution than we could ever imagine. They are absolute roll gold Christians. However, it is also the case, it is a simple matter of historical fact, that Western civilization grew up as a result of Christianity and in a dialogue with Christianity. It's also true that Christians did a lot of bad things over that time, no doubt about that. I think overwhelmingly, though, Christianity was a force for the good, but certainly a lot of Christians did a lot of bad things. But now the West is going crazy. It is abandoning the roots of its own civilization. So a couple of years ago, John, I wrote a memoir. I went to all these book festivals, writers' festivals, very nice of them to invite me. There was not a single book written from a pro-Christian or a pro-Jewish point of view. Imagine going to a writers' festival in Islam and not finding a single book, in Indonesia rather, and not finding a single book that dealt with Islam. Imagine going to a writers' festival in India and not finding a single book that dealt with Hinduism, or in Thailand, not finding a single book that dealt with Buddhism. That is crackers. All of these other societies have vigorous national and civilizational narratives. And with the Chinese, it's largely nationalism. Same with the Russians, really, it's nationalism. With other civilizations, it is often other religions, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. Only in the West are we saying the very idea of a narrative, of a transcendent purpose, of a metaphysical purpose. We reject the very idea of that. And I think we're going mad as a result. The human psyche is designed to have meaning. Viktor Frankl, in his beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning, he was a survivor of Auschwitz and Hitler's death camps. He says the essential need of all human beings is for meaning. With meaning, a human being can bear anything. When he knows why, he can bear anything. But without meaning, a human being is a very, very dangerous person. A human being then tends to look only for intensity of experience. And in the end, if there's no absolute, then there's no reason to judge things absolutely out of order, such as, killing large numbers of people or enslaving people or deciding that some categories of human being are subhuman and ought to be killed. That's the road we're heading down. It's quite crazy. However, this is not an essay of cultural despair. There are tremendous green shoots, new movements. Although Christianity in the West is in ambient statistical decline, there are tremendous signs of rebirth and regrowth within the Christian movement in the West as well.
It does strike me, I want to be careful how I put this, because I do read the comments and they're very illustrative and I appreciate them hugely when I have one of these conversations. And sometimes people feel I'm prickly about atheists. And as I said earlier, I have the greatest respect for people who have really thought it through and come to that conclusion, even though I disagree with them. I mean, that's my motto. We've got to have a reasoned and a polite debate. But I do throw this challenge out, and you make the point in the book, there's nothing new about the new atheists. It's all been said before, from the 1860s on particularly. Alternative explanations for who we are and how we came about and so forth have been very fashionable. Their great problem is that they have not been able to fashion a narrative that unifies us and satisfies us. And I think that's one of the great challenges, because the monument to secularism is all around us. It's in confusion, it's in tribalism, it's in a return to identity politics. Identity politics is not new. That's just the law of the jungle, where you identify with others to seek safety against everybody else. And we have record levels of, as we know, anxiety and depression and self-harm. It's not actually a pretty picture. And the challenge for people who reject the need for a unifying narrative, I think, is to say, well, how on earth are we ever going to make our societies work? Because the story's not too good at the moment.
Well, that's right. I mean, human beings are social creatures, and they live in societies. They want to have a social purpose as well as an individual purpose. Human beings also yearn for God. They yearn for meaning. They yearn for the transcendent. I mean, if you take God away from them, the consequences are generally very ugly. I am not critical of atheists generally. That's fine. And there are lots of individual atheists who transcend this and live lives of purpose themselves. But for the society, it's disastrous. I am very critical of Dawkins. I think his books about Christianity are tremendously dishonest. And he sets, even though he does say we ought to have biblical literacy, and I quote him on that, but he sets up many straw men. He doesn't deal with contemporary, well, not even contemporary, he doesn't deal with traditional mainstream Christianity. He takes the weirdest fundamentalist he can find and then asserts that stands for all of Christianity. He doesn't, in my view, deal honestly with history. And he puts his old 19th century arguments next to a lot of irrelevant science. So he'll say the universe is 14 billion years old. Well, that proves God couldn't have created it, because why would he waste his time spending 14 billion years just to produce this little planet for us? Well, how on earth would Richard Dawkins know what God would do? That strikes me as absolutely characteristic of God, that he would spend 14 billion years preparing this beautiful garden for us. And the argument, it's 14 billion years old, therefore it can't be God. That's not an argument, that's just a prejudice. And most of the new atheist stuff is not really an argument. It's just a prejudice. But there is, as a result, a tremendous ignorance in our society. So just reading the scriptures, I read a lot of the Old Testament for the last book and a lot of the New Testament in detail and repeatedly for this book. And you think, gosh, this is the most astonishing literature that the human race has ever produced. Even if you don't believe it's true, the Gospel of John is the most astounding piece of human literature. N.T. Wright, in his splendid biography of Paul, argues that Paul should be taught in philosophy, history, politics, psychology classes, because this 80 or 90 pages is the most riveting, transcendent, penetrating, brilliant, integrated prose that human beings have ever created. And yet, where do you study Paul today? In what high school course or what university course does anybody read the letter to Romans or the letter to Galatians or something? So we'll subject all our poor kids to the Safe Schools program, but we'll make sure they never come across Paul or any of the other scriptures. That strikes me just at the level of base knowledge as crazy. And given how central this knowledge has been to our own civilization, willful self-harm.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.